I followed him out with my eyes, and as I did so, by some trick of unconscious cerebration, there came surging into my head the phrase, "The Moreau Hollows," was it? The Moreau... It sent my memory back 10 years. The Moreau horrors. The phrase drifted loose in my mind for a moment, and then I saw it in red lettering on a little buff-covered pamphlet that to read made one shiver and creep. Then I remembered distinctly all about it. That long-forgotten pamphlet came back with startling vividness to my mind. I had been a mere lad then, and Moreau was, I suppose, about 50, a prominent and masterful philologist, well known in scientific circles for his extraordinary imagination and his brutal directness in discussion. Was this the same Moreau? He had published some very astonishing facts in connection with the transfusion of blood, and in addition was known to be doing valuable work on morbid growths. Then suddenly his career was closed. He had to leave England. A journalist obtained access to his laboratory in the capacity of a laboratory assistant, and with deliberate intention of making sensational exposures, and by the help of a shocking accident, if it was an accident, his gruesome pamphlet became notorious. On the day of its publication, a wretched dog, flayed and otherwise mutilated, escaped from Moreau's house. It was in the silly season, and a prominent editor, a cousin of the temporary laboratory assistant, appealed to the conscience of the nation. It was not the first time that conscience had turned against the methods of research. The doctor was simply howled out of the country. It may be he deserved to be, but I still think the tepid support of his fellow investigators and his desertion by the great body of scientific workers was a shameful thing. Yet, some of his experiments, by the journalist's account, were wantonly cruel. He might, perhaps, have purchased his social peace by abandoning his investigations, but he apparently preferred the latter, as most men would who had once fallen under the overmastering spell of research. He was unmarried, and had indeed nothing but his own interests to consider. I felt convinced that this must be the same man. Everything pointed to it. It dawned upon me to what end the puma and the other animals, which had now been brought with the other luggage into the enclosure behind the house, were destined. And a curious faint odor, the halatitis of something familiar, an odor that had been in the background of my consciousness, hitherto suddenly came forward into the forefront of my thoughts. It was the antiseptic odor of the operating room. I heard the puma growling through the wall, and one of the dogs yelped as though it had been struck. H.G. Wells, The Island of Dr. Moreau. Your Sunday Penguin for today. Hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. Now, a number of weeks ago, I did a little video about H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And in that video, I said I was going to be going through H.G. Wells' early science fiction novels. And then I promptly didn't do it. So I decided to use this occasion, the Sunday Penguin, to get on with the second of my H.G. Wells videos, The Island of Dr. Moreau, his second great science fiction story, and a horror story as well. My second video that I did was the top 10 greatest classic horror books, I think it was. And this was on that list. This is definitely, to my mind, a great horror story. We've got Edward Prendick, whose ship went down in the ocean, and he was the only survivor, was found adrift in a dinghy by a boat, and was rescued by a very creepy guy called Montgomery. And the boat was full of cages of wild animals and some awful strange looking people. And so our hero, Edward Prendick, was brought to this island. And on this island was this strange man in an enclosure on the island, obviously doing some sort of scientific research on these animals. So there's a lot of interesting things about this book. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plot because it's kind of hard to talk about this book without going into it a little bit, and you've probably already heard about it anyway if you haven't read it. But basically, Dr. Moreau, the cold, calculating, scientific genius, is doing scientific research all right. But what he's doing is he's taking all these different animals and he's changing them surgically into as close as he can come to people. So he's basically changing their physical structure as much as you could back in the Victorian age. And so basically he's making monsters, is what this guy's doing. This is a book about a guy who's making monsters out of animals, trying to turn them as much as he can into people. And poor Prendick is stuck on this island with Moreau and Montgomery. And Montgomery's a useless drunk, so he's no help. So he's stuck on this island with Moreau, who's obviously kind of a lunatic, because he's kind of doing this just to do it. If this is going to be helpful to humanity in any way, I must have missed that part of the book. It's just purely a scientific thing with him. He's doing it just to see if he can do it, and to learn as much as he can. And to see if he can turn these animals into people. And there's this whole society of animals on this island. And they come up with, Moreau comes up with this fake religion to keep them from going back to their animal-like ways. And all these rules, and he has the House of Pain where he punishes these poor things. It's an interesting story and pretty scary. There's some grotesque and frightening moments in this book. Mostly just because of the wanton cruelty that is displayed. Cruelty to the animals, of course. Cruelty to people. Just a lot of that. Just Moreau just coldly doing awful things in the name of science. And it's also a book, and I think I might have mentioned this when I talked about it just a teensy bit in that classic horror video. It's also a book about alienation. Because what happens to poor Prendick in the course of this story is that he is forced to live with these creatures, for a long time. And there's a point where they start to devolve and go back to their animal ways, but they've been changed, right? So they're just not regular animals. And it changes him experiencing that. So that this is all told through his point of view. It's a first-person narrative, his first-person narrative. So from the very beginning of the book that he gets off the island. It says so pretty much at the beginning of the book. So it's not a spoiler to say that he gets off. But he is changed. He's not the same man he was when he came to that island. He's somebody else, and he can't help but look at the people he sees around him in London and other places. When he looks at them now, he's kind of seeing the creatures on the island of Dr. Moreau. He sees little bits of those creatures in the people all around him, and he just it alienates him from them because of his experience. It's interesting. It's an interesting book that's about a lot of different things, and every time you read it, it's one of those, And a lot of classic works are great for this, which is why they last, which is why they end up as penguins. Because every time you read one of these, you can find something else. And this is definitely one of those books. I think this is one of H.G. Wells' best books. It's little, but he packs an awful lot into this book. Yeah, a book about people, about animals, about society. So definitely, this is a Sunday Penguin that you're going to want to check out. Eventually, I will be talking about, what would the next H.G. Wells book I would talk about would probably be War of the Worlds, and that's a great one. Don't know if I have that in Penguin Classics. I think I probably do. So that'll be a Sunday Penguin for another day. Thank you for stopping by once again here at Stately Vaughan Manor. Be back here tomorrow for Mythos Monday and some other fun things throughout the week. So thanks, guys.